Hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to the Ladies of Wealth podcast, where we help hardworking women and a few good men dump debt, build wealth, and prosper. It's Wealth Building Wednesday, where we answer your money questions with style and grace. To ask your question, submit online at askjjc.com or leave a voicemail at 1-833, the number 4, Ask JJC.
Before we get into the questions today, we've got a little teaching.
Hey, it's JJ Conway. I want to welcome you to Wealth Building Wednesday. I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm going to answer some money questions, but first, I've got to talk to you about something that's got me a little tiny bit perplexed, and that is the naming of our new high school football stadium. Those of you who might not remember, after I retired from the military, I moved to rural Texas and I now live in a town called Stephenville, Texas. My husband's been teaching here for over a decade while I finished out my military career. And once we realized that I was not going to get Mr. Man to move to the East Coast, I decided to move it back here with him. And we moved the boys out so that my son could start 8th grade football. And he has had a wonderful, wonderful experience with our local school district. They are very, very good to him. And in fact, the only opportunities that were denied my big boy are the ones that he himself took himself out of the running. So from a parent perspective of having moved, this is his 8th school. The high school here was his 8th school, y'all. Having gone from school to school to school to school where they were constantly trying to kick my son out, constantly trying to get him out of the classes that he was qualified to be in, academically scoring to be in, we finally got into a school district that was like, hey, we'll work with you. He played football. He played a couple other sports early on. He was top in the band. I mean, he was just warmly accepted by a lot of administrators and such. And even though he did have some racial issues with the students, I don't feel that those racial issues, other than an English teacher, oh, we can talk about that some other day. I don't think the racial issues translated to his schooling. In fact, I think his decision and this was a conscious decision. We talked about it after the fact while we were driving him to college. He had a conscious decision that he was going to be the football dude and the band dude, and he wasn't going to let on how smart he was. And that kind of broke my heart, but I remember being that way in high school myself. I always had straight A's because I was trying hard to get out of poverty. And this is not what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the football stadium. But since we're on this, let me just talk a little bit about this whole poverty culture, because this whole poverty culture thing makes it really hard for people who want to be smart or people who want to get out of poverty through their education to actually be able to do so. And so I remember being in high school and the other kids laughing at me for making straight A's. And there would be times where the teacher would hand me my test score and I would try to turn it over. And I used to sit in the back of the room and just kind of hope that I could just kind of blend in the background and no one would notice me, because if they noticed me, they were going to make fun of me, which is really funny because I am very much hard to ignore. I've never blended in very well ever my entire life. And I certainly make enough money now being noticeably present and speaking my voice. So I had forgotten what those days were like. And I also didn't realize how much my son suffered at the hands of some of his classmates, because from a parent perspective, this was the first school where I wasn't fighting the principal about my son being in the classes he needed to be in. Every other place we'd been to, he had this or he had that. But even when he had straight A's, y'all, I'll never forget it. When he had straight A's, one of 6 kids in the entire school to have straight A's all year long, and they wouldn't test him for honors because they thought that he couldn't hack, quote unquote, couldn't hack advanced academics. And so I pull him out of that school and I put him in a private school. Now, that private school is where my son learned about the KKK and what nooses were for, people like him. But the academics of the private school were amazing. Uh, that's where he built a hoverboard in 7th grade, right? So there's some goods and some bads with that, living in Louisiana. But I'll never forget when the football coach for the middle school said, "Hey, we noticed that Philip didn't come to camp." And I said, "Well, coach, they told me that they weren't going to test him for honors, even though he had straight A's all year long, was one of only 6 kids in the entire school to have straight A's all year long." And so I pulled him out and I put him in a private school, and he'll be playing for I think it was called the Jets at that time. That it was a football team of all the little private schools. So this private school had 1 or 2 kids who played ball, that private school had 1 or 2 kids that played ball, something like that. Do you know 2 weeks later, my son got a letter from that school that said, "Congratulations, you've been admitted to a honors homeroom." And I got another call from somebody on staff, "Hey, we heard the good news. We hope that Philip will be on the field soon." I did not return that call, and I did not move my son because you showed me very clearly who you were the first time, right? And so this school, Stephenville Independent School District, I'm very, very impressed, not only with how my son had access to a quality education, no matter the fact that he was in the minority and no matter what the stereotypes are about living in rural Texas. There are some very real issues about being a Black person living in rural Texas. And where I'm of dubious origin, we really don't know if I'm Black or not. I claim Black, that's how I grew up. But we really don't know what my origin is. And I can pass for a lot of different cultures. Even the other day, somebody's like, "Yeah, that's what us fill in the blank of people of nationality have to suffer with, isn't it?" And I thought to myself, I'm not from your country, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to laugh and roll on because I get that all the time from various different cultures: Ethiopian, Middle Eastern, various like Lebanon. I get it all the time. Puerto Rican. I get it all the time. In fact, I had a Spanish dude, older gentleman, go off on me about being one of these young people that forgot where I came from because I couldn't speak Spanish. I'm like, I'm not Spanish. I mean, I may be a little bit, but I'm pretty sure I'm not Spanish. I might be Puerto Rican. I don't know. But anywho, that's so when it came time to have the football field, I think the reason I'm explaining this about my son is because I want you to know how very much I appreciate Stephenville ISD. They have amazing for being a rural school. And, I mean, it's really I don't know how long they're gonna be able to be considered rural because the town is rapidly growing. Like, "Y'all, we got our second Starbucks." All right? But I remember when they got the first Starbucks, like, woo. Um, anyway, for being in rural Texas, I'm very impressed with the programs that they have. They have a really good nursing program where people can graduate with certain entry level certificates in, I don't know what you call them, but like being the techs and doing the lower level things that you do in the medical field. We have a really good automotive program. We've got a robotics program that's competitive. Of course, our far agriculture program is amazing. Agriculture is the big thing out here, but just so many different programs that you would not expect in such a small school. So many different programs that I didn't see even in larger markets. So I don't I've spent 8 minutes now qualifying what I'm about to say by telling you how great the school district is. And I'm not just saying that because they pay my husband, right? And I'm a kept woman now, so I have every vested interest in my husband keeping his job. I mean, look, I wouldn't mind if he retired, y'all. We got investments, and we've got my military pension, and we've got our investments, and we live fairly frugally. We could really live anywhere and have a great time. But we have a little one who likes it here and is doing well, and he's thriving. So, anywho, I say all that to say I was caught off guard today when my husband said, they've named the stadium after Art Briles. They're going to name the new stadium after Art Briles. Now, if you've never heard me talk about the Stephenville High School Stadium, I have long since been an advocate, since before I even moved here, of the high school building their own stadium. Okay, long since. Because I remember when we used to have our football games when my husband first started teaching here, we used to have our football games at the college, and we still do for till this year's over. Well, actually, I guess the season is over. Uh, so we used to is correct grammar. We used to have our football games at the college, and I remember when the college did renovations in a anticipation of going D1. And they were moving up the ranks and moving up the ranks and moving up the ranks. And when they renovated the stadium, a couple things happened. One, the sound quality in the stadium went down, which if you're the wife of a band director, it matters to you because you got to hear about that, right? And then I became the announcer for the band halftime. And it's like, yeah, I really care about that because I need the people I'm talking to hear what I have to say, right? And so I've gotten better about adjusting for the acoustics of that stadium, but they also took away the ability for the high school to fundraise, and everything became run by Sodexo, which is, it's part of the natural progression of a growing organization. I'm not faulting the college for doing what people do when they move somewhere into a new leadership position. That their job is to grow that organization, and the leaders who moved here to grow Tarleton University have done just that. And so ever since that time, though, when they first did that, and they made it more difficult for our students for our band fans and everybody to feed the kids, and they took away the fundraising ability, and they took away all those levels of autonomy that we used to enjoy when the school was a smaller school. That's the moment that I began advocating, why does this is a championship team, why does this school not have their own stadium? And of course, I'm not from here, so I doubt anybody even paid attention to what I have to say, but I'm also a very big believer in energy. You say something and you put it out there long enough, the energy builds momentum and it becomes things. Faith is the substance. My faith translates into substance. So when we finally got the first time it got struck down, but the second time it passed, when we finally got people willing and ready to push a bond to fund this new stadium, I was all on board because I see the impact on our youth. And it's important to me that our youth have something of their own to be proud of and not always have to find stadiums when the college had a conflict or things like that. It's very important to our youth to have their own. And it says something to our youth. And I've subbed enough at the high school, not a whole lot, but I've subbed enough at the high school to realize most of those kids don't have any hope. And they don't feel like anybody cares. And while the big stadium is probably not, nobody's building a 30 million, probably going to end up 50, but $30 million stadium to show kids that people care. They're probably building a $30 million stadium because they know they're going to get that money back, and they're going to put forward their program and all those things. But be that as it may be, any little bit of things that we can do to really show our children that we care and to provide avenues for their success is a win. And in this case, the stadium can be used for a lot more than just football and band. So I was a big advocate of it. I was a big advocate of it, and I was also a big advocate of tearing down with facts and figures the different arguments that people had against it as to why we shouldn't do this or why this wasn't in the best interest of the community. I get if you feel a certain way, yet with facts and figures, it did appear to be the best thing. So I was been very excited about this. Well, I saw the announcement the other day. I think it was announced at the last week's football game. I saw the announcement, but I didn't care because I didn't know who any of these people were. And so I found out about it. And so I found out about it. I found out about it. I dismissed it, and then my husband brought it up. He's like, they're naming the field after Art Briles. And those of you who are sports enthusiasts, you already know who this guy is. But I had a lapse in judgment because I don't really pay much attention to it. And then my husband looked at me kind of funny. I think he was expecting me to go spin up and go through the roof, right? And so here's what happens. He says, the guy from Baylor. I was like, that guy? And then my husband got this big smile on his face. And I pictured in my mind that meme that says, got him. Because I started it and I thought, wait a second. He got me. He got me. He knew I was going to do that. And so my first thought was, I don't understand. Why would we taint the image of our school by naming it after somebody who has that bit of a storied past, right? And so I I I was really quite taken aback, and I actually drafted a kind of a scathing thing, like, "Hey, look, I understand he was here and y'all won championships, but for the rest of the world, we need to care about the optics." And then I paused and I looked at my husband and I said, I'm pretty sure Briles is the name so and so mentioned to me here and there. So I start scrolling through my text, and sure enough, some of the former players I know that were part of that team, that championship team, were talking about how close they are and how everybody, they're all one big family. And they just talked to Coach Briles the other day and answered a question that I had, and I said, "Oh, okay, this person is somebody who's very important to the people here." So I erased the post that I made. I hadn't posted it yet, but I erased all the stuff that I had written, and I wrote a rather tame post that basically said, "I'm surprised I haven't seen any rants or raves on this." All right. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with rural Texas, I'm sure this exists somewhere outside of Texas, but I never saw this until I moved to Texas. It's the concept of rant or rave pages for your county or your city. And probably for me, the issue is have not seen this before because I've always lived in places where you've got millions of people. Or like in Shreveport, 200,000 people between Shreveport and Bossier City. They've got individual little rant and rave style kind of pages for Shreveport, but I never saw, rant and rave Arlington, Virginia. I never saw anything like that. So, so I think it's just because the market's so big, that's just not something. But when you're in a small town, the relationship dynamics are different. And so I post this thing in the Rant and Rave Facebook group, and I've decided I'm just going to do this podcast, and then I'm going to go to bed, and we'll see what people say in the morning. But let me tell you, the first right away, we've got a couple of comments. One is like following with the side eyes. Another one was like, just say rant in your post and quit trying to make someone else do it for you. And somebody responds to them saying, "You mean to sound so harsh, or were you being funny?" And then somebody else says they're projecting. And then somebody else says, "You noticed that too, huh?" And I thought, "Oh, this is interesting." Somebody says maybe people just don't care. And of course, they use much more colorful language than I'm using on my G rated podcast. And then somebody's like, "Oh, there's plenty of comments on this." But the thing is I did a search. Now, y'all, this is a town. This is a town. There's a lot to love about Stephenville, Texas. And I'll tell you right now, the Rant and Rave page is absolutely my biggest source of entertainment for local news, right? But this is a town where people complain, like, somebody put way too much lettuce on my burger, right? So I just would expect there to be something, and there just wasn't. There wasn't anything goods or bads, okay? So that's why I was curious. I'm like, what is the deal here? And then it's like, I've seen several articles with good or bad comments. I think it's wonderful and long overdue to recognize the guy. Manufacturing drama, please stop. Okay? Plenty Plenty of raves on other pages. If you want your car keyed, house egged, kids' lunch money stolen, feel free to rant. Art Briles in Stephenville. And so, right before I came in here to record this, I posted, "Oops, I guess I, quote, told y'all I wasn't from here without telling y'all I'm not from here." And then somebody else says, "Bad comments about him is stupid. Bring it." And then I'm just gonna be very curious of what it happens in the morning. Someone's like, "It sounds like a touchy issue to be speaking too loudly," and someone else says, "You should have kept this one in the drafts. Coach Briles is highly respected by the majority around here." Okay, so now I get that. I absolutely get that, and I'll be curious to see what the comments are like in the morning when I get up. But I'm gonna tell you something. It's very telling to me as an outsider to this town that people are not commenting in a page where you get 200 comments in an hour on something where people are really passionate about. Okay, that's very telling to me that there's such little comments. Okay, the other thing that I think is very interesting is you don't have to name a football field after anybody. And you might say, "Well, he's really big around here." But, well, what does the rest of the world think? What does the rest of Texas think? What does the rest of the United States think? Like, this thing made the national news. Like, when I went to search it, I found national news channels that had picked up this story. And they were all quite perplexed as to why this high school is naming their thing after somebody with such a storied, scandalous past. Now, I'm going to qualify and say, and I'm looking at my time, I may not get to teaching today. I may not get to answering my questions today. So I know somebody had a question about prenups, and so we were going to talk about prenups and estate planning. I might do that for next week. I might just tack that on the end of whatever I teach Thursday night tomorrow, but we'll see. Yeah. I'll bring it up tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Nothing. Okay. So if you're, so, because sometimes, so for those of you who are new, like if this is your first time listening to the podcast and you're here because I'm talking about Art Briles, all right. The normal format of the podcast is we have a Thursday night class every night, every Thursday night, 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, and we extract the podcast from that Thursday night class. Then you have occasions like this where I specifically record an episode, or we have occasions like this where I might interview somebody one on one. Okay. And so then those things are not part of the Thursday classes. But most of the content that has to do with Wealth Building Wednesday is usually extracted from the Thursday night classes. All right. So I'll probably cover those questions tomorrow because I'm looking at my time and I think I'm going to run out of time for this episode. Okay. But before I close, I want to make sure y'all understand when somebody says there was charges against somebody or somebody says a person had a scandal, you need to know that that does not phase me. That does not phase me because in my life as a 23-year Air Force veteran, plus 4 more years at the Air Force Academy, I came into the Air Force in an era where people thought it was their God-given duty to get rid of people like me. And I didn't even know that. Okay. I grew up mostly overseas on air bases where Americans were Americans and we were one big old American team. And so I was very, very surprised to see how things played out in the military. And when I was at the Air Force Academy, I honestly internalized a lot of what happened to me as something wrong with me or my failure to do this or my failure to understand that. It wasn't until my first duty assignment where I overheard my boss and our deputy talking about all the tricks they use to get rid of people like me. And I'm sitting in my cubicle like, wow, I'm really glad I'm so short. They can't tell I'm in the office. Should I make some noise or should I hope that they end their conversation and go out the front door because my office was by the back door? We had an L-shaped office. So you couldn't really see me back there and you couldn't see me because I was so short. And that's when my eyes came open that all these different things happen. I'm going to give you an example of one of the things that happened to me at the Air Force Academy. A colleague or my roommate took another cadet's CD music. You know, we listened to CDs back then. Took the internet had just come out. That the end of that year, the internet came out for everybody. It was Usenet, y'all. It wasn't even pretty pictures. It was just text, right? The internet came out, and so this was the good old days, right? Everybody was listening to CDs. She takes my classmate's CD, puts it in my drawer. My classmate goes crazy about where is his CD. Now, this is at the end of our freshman year. For the entire school year, we've not been allowed to have music. We've not been allowed to have TV. Been allowed to speak but 7 different phrases. We've not been allowed to walk casually across the terrazzo of the air of the courtyard of where our school was. We had to run on certain lines that were embedded in the terrazzo. Like for all these months, we have been less than human, and we finally get an opportunity to conduct ourselves like humans, and everybody's happy to have their music and to have their some more creature comforts and be treated like a normal human being again. And so in that environment, it's extra devastating when your one of your favorite CDs disappears. And so they have this whole thing about where is it, where is it, where is it? And then after a while, my roommate says, I found this in her drawer. And they were like, "That's not in." I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And she opens up my drawer and boom, there it is. I had no idea, right? And so then they all go to have a meeting to decide how they're going to kick me out of the academy because that's an honor offense. And I'd already gotten an honor offense because I played a prank on one of my other co-workers. Roommates. So I had an honor offense earlier in the school year. I learned that they can play pranks on people, but I can't play pranks on people because they play pranks on people and ha ha ha, oh, that's so funny. I play a prank on somebody. Oh, that's an honor hit. Okay. And so I knew to dot my I's and cross my T's, y'all. But she did this and they're having this meeting to decide what they're going to do about me. And y'all, I wasn't even a cusser before I gave my life to the Lord, you know? And I actually had to rehearse in my mind the statements I was going to say with the harsh language I was going to use to let them know I didn't steal their blankety blank CD. And I went down to that room, y'all. And I delivered my line and everybody's eyes bugged out and the guy whose it was like, "Well, I'm pretty sure she didn't steal it because I've never heard her talk like that before." And eventually my roommate admitted to framing me because she knew that if I got another honor hit, I'd be kicked out. Okay? And later on in my career in the military, so that was at the Air Force Academy. That was my first introduction to the fact that you're always going to get hit with stuff, even if you didn't do it, to try to get you out of there, out of the Air Force. And later in my career, I found that most women who looked like me, who attained a high rank or did a high position of something, they themselves were hit with false charges. And, I'm a bit of a cream puff now, and I can't do the things I used to could do because of a car accident that ended my military career. But, back in the day, I was hot stuff. And I was the Air Force voting member for the Nuclear Test Intelligence Committee. I was the Air Force voting member for the Joint Atomic Energy Intelligence Committee. I was the person who made the decision based on the research others did of whether or not which electronics could go into the missile silos. I created and chaired the Nuclear Threats Community Interest, all 17 intelligence agencies, and I was the chair. Okay. So I was something. Now don't kidnap me. I had a car accident. I can't do all that kind of stuff anymore. I can't build you a bomb anymore. All right. I'm just a dumpy mom in the middle of nowhere, Texas now. But back in the day, I was somebody. And I wasn't supposed to be somebody. I wasn't even supposed to make it. They did every trick in the book they could to get rid of me, and I was not to be gotten rid of. So when you tell me this coach had a scandal, my first thought isn't, oh, he's a bad man. My first thought is, ooh, who did he make mad? Who did he make mad? Who did he upset? Because that's how scandals are. And I know Texas football is not the military, but I'm sure the military parallels the rest of the world. In the military, a lot of times when people have a scandal, it's because you made somebody mad and they're trying to get rid of you, or they've been trying to find a way to get rid of you. And if you don't give them a way to get rid of you, they're going to frame you a way to get rid of you. And the way that the leadership feels about it is the fact that it happened in the first place is a sign that something is wrong with you. In fact, that's what happened when my cadet roommate framed me for stealing the CD. Guess who got in trouble over that? I got in trouble over that. You want to know why I got in trouble over that at the Air Force Academy? I got in trouble over that at the Air Force Academy because the prevailing thought was something must be wrong with me and my leadership style, that my classmate could think of no other reason to prevent somebody as dastardly as me from joining her Air Force than to frame me so I would get kicked out. And the fact that my other classmates initially bought it, that was what the leadership used to justify getting me in chore. So I'm what the Air Force Academy calls a centurion. That means I had 100 tours, which is supposed to be marching around with your one tour is marching around with your fake rubber ducky M16 for an hour. But thanks to bad weather, I didn't have to march those tours. I actually served them 2 for 1 in my room. So basically academic probation for somebody who's as smart as me. That was like the worst, right? But it's all good. It's all good. It taught me a lot. And that's why I'm saying, you know, when somebody has a scandal, this guy had a scandal. This guy got a pretty big scandal of covering up sexual assault charges. Well, guess what? A lot of sexual assault charges get covered up. And so, did it happen? I don't know. Did it not happen? I don't know. Did he make somebody mad and they said it happened? I don't know. It probably did happen because guess what happens on college campuses? I've been to college. It still happens on college campuses. And so I don't know what happened or didn't happen, but I'm just telling you, when somebody says they've got a scandal or a charge against them, for me, that's not enough for me to say something's wrong with them. So when I posted this post, I actually thought I was going to get somebody upset. And then I was going to get a whole bunch of people like, oh, this guy's such a great guy. This guy's such a great guy. Well, we'll see what it says in the morning. But the reason I'm talking about this on the podcast is because no matter what the reasonings are for us doing what we're doing here in Stephenville, Texas, in one of the best school districts I've ever been acquainted with, the fact of the matter is how it looks to the outside world matters. And it may not matter to the people here because the people here are very local centric. But if you're building a business or if you are rearing children who are going to play in the global world field, it is important to understand the optics. It's important to understand how what you do in your domicile, in your sphere of influence here, speaks to others and what it communicates to others. And that may not be important for the local folks in this area. But for someone like me who has a global impact, someone like me who makes most of my money from outside of Texas, it's very important to me financially to understand why we're doing what we do. In my travels, when I say I'm from Stephenville, Texas, there's 3 things that people know about Stephenville, Texas. Interestingly, the cowboy capital of the world is not one of them. The whole rodeo capital of the world. And I guess we used to be the dairy because people know the dairies, okay? People know Heart Eight Barbecue. And people know just south of Stephenville is a lovely little place that used to be called the Coffee Cup Cafe, which is now just called the Coffee Cup, but it's still spelled with K's. And these kinds of things affect my livelihood. For example, I tried to have a conference here earlier this year. My attendees refused to come. And so it's very important to someone like me that if you have something that's scandalous or you have something that's controversial or if you have something that's unsavory, even if people in town don't care, and people in town don't care about the scandal of Art Briles, they care about the wins, they care about how he poured into the community, they care about how he poured into those players, they care about the relationship that he and the players still have to this day. Those are all very fine things. However, it does not help me have an argument to use when I travel outside of this region if people can't articulate the many benefits. And so it's very important from us from an economic perspective. I was unprepared for the argument of we're not coming to your racist town. Especially when one of my guest speakers was like, yeah, I remember the first time I came through Stephenville. It was 2017. We were passing through town. There was something going on the square. Me and my husband decided to get food and see what was going on. We got out. It was a KKK rally. We turned around and went back and never came back again. And I'm like, no, I promise you will be safe. But I wasn't prepared. And so when this came up, I wanted to be prepared, even though, like I said, when I hear that somebody has a scandal, I don't care. I care about the results. I care about the outcome because I think of, this black woman who used to be the head of a bank and she had hit with a scandal. They removed her, but the scandal turned out to be unfounded. And so she was not guilty and it was declared unfounded, just like so many other people who look like me in government, in academia, in the financial industry. Scandal doesn't mean anything to me, but the results do. And so it's important for us to understand that. And I hope you've enjoyed my walking through that. And now I don't really think a whole lot of people in Stephenville listen to my podcast, but if you do, please understand that I'm not here to stir up drama. Well, you know what? Actually, I make some good money stirring up a little bit of drama, but I really do care about my community. And I care about what people say about my community when I travel and let people know where I'm from. And so I hope this is giving you something to think about when you do what you do and when you're in charge of what you're in charge of. Make sure, the Bible says we should always be ready for an answer with our faith, right? And that's the same in anything that we do. I'm not telling you don't take an unpopular position. What I'm saying is if you know your position is unpopular, be ready with an answer for those who might come against you. Be ready to take the flack. Don't just come at people with threats like, oh, you better not say nothing. Your car's going to get keyed. Your house is going to get egged. Like, be ready with an answer. I'm not telling you don't have an unpopular position. I have a lot of unpopular positions, but be ready with an answer and consider the costs. Consider the optics. And when you are working in your business or whatever it is that you're doing, think outside of your sphere of influence. The world is accelerating to a point where we can no longer be in our silos, or what do some people call them, cylinders of excellence. This area probably is going to get away with another 20 or so years of being a silo unto itself. But eventually, it too was going to be connected as part of the larger world system. And we have to understand how to play well with others. So I'm not saying anything for or against the naming of the stadium. I'm simply saying for this Wealth Building Wednesday that you look at what you're doing on a global scale. And if what you're doing works on the local scale but may not sound nice on the global scale, be ready with an answer for why you're doing what you're doing and why you made the decisions that you made. And that way you will be able to continue having the impact and building the wealth that you deserve. I'm JJ Conway. Thanks for listening. Take care. Be blessed. Hey, y'all. Hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and forward the podcast. To ask your question, submit online at askjjc.com or leave a voicemail at 1-833-4-ASK-JJC. Hey, and don't forget to go to ladiesofwealth.com. You can download past episodes and take our free class of the month. Now go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.